Yesterday, Mayor Bill DeBlasio of New York City announced that starting today, you will need proof of vaccination in order to enjoy all that New York City has to offer. They're calling it the Key to NYC Pass. And he says you will unlock all of these things, which means they've locked down again for half the population. It's only a little bit over 50% of the people in New York City who are vaccinated. And this will mean that all of those who aren't will not be able to go to most indoor activities. My friends, New York City has gone full 1984. It is worse than you realize. I decided to look into the executive order, the decree of despot Democrat DeBlasio, to see what exemptions there were and whether or not they were actually being reasonable. Now, of course, I think across the board, vaccine mandates are unreasonable for a lot of reasons. But I thought maybe they're going to say, okay, look, medical exemptions, certain exemptions apply, and we're not going to bar people for this or that reason. It's kind of a, it's airtight. Actually, I shouldn't say it's airtight because oddly, you are allowed to go inside without a vaccine if you're a performer, friends with a performer, going to the bathroom, performing repairs. It's really strange, actually. But I looked into it, and one thing I noticed, there's no medical exemption. Now, certainly that must be a mistake. I was on Twitter not too long ago and having a good little tweet with Cameron Kasky. You may be familiar with him, one of the kids from Parkland. And I would say, while he's probably not identifying himself as a Democrat voter, he falls in the establishment Democrat tribal bloc, whatever that really means. But that's typically where his opinions lie. And I was talking about Google and other companies mandating vaccines for their companies. I said the problem with this is that there are people who have medical conditions that bar them from getting vaccines. To which he responded, don't you think there will be medical exemptions for these mandates? Well, I assumed yes. But my point was also, but there are people who have medical issues where they're not barred from getting the vaccine, but have to make a difficult personal choice. And there's a lot of reasons for this. Some people are immunocompromised and the doctor says it could go either way. I don't want to recommend it or tell you not to get it. One story of a guy saying his doctor said, well, you should get it, but I'm not going to administer it to you, which is kind of mixed signals you're getting from your doctor. Like, wait a minute, I'm supposed to trust you. Ultimately, I think what this comes down to is people should not have to out themselves as having some kind of illness or disorder or disease to justify going to a restaurant. But more importantly, my friends, the law also states you must have an ID. Amazing. You want to go to a restaurant? Show your ID. You want to go to a bar? ID. Gym? ID. Now, a lot of these places that require membership require that anyway. Like, okay, so bars, you need an ID to get in anyway. Cafe? ID. Markets? ID. You now need an identification to get in anywhere. And is that really what's going on? I'll tell you why this makes me angry. And I called the city and I called some lawyers and man, I'm heated on this one. Maybe you're a fan of the Timcast IRL podcast. It's the more conversational show we do at 8 p.m. If you've seen the show, then you know Lydia. If you haven't, Lydia is the producer who does the camera switching and things like that. Lydia confirmed to me that it was okay to talk about this. She has multiple sclerosis, which means because of this disorder and autoimmune issues, she is ineligible for the COVID vaccine. In fact, her doctor says you cannot get this. So that's why I called the city and I asked them, what does this mean for me, my friends? And they said straight up, too bad. No joke. There is no medical exemption in New York City's mandate. If you, for some reason, are immunocompromised, maybe you have cancer, they are telling you you will not be able to access services in this city. This is some kind of creepy, I don't know what you want to call it, eugenics. Only the strongest are allowed. I find it disgusting. It's fascistic. And these businesses are going along with it. Save some. Because we have one story of one business in Brooklyn saying no. But let's talk about this. And then we've got other news. Because aside from this, boosters are here. The New York Times announces that boosters are going to be advised now by the United States. I want to show you what the story is on the vaccine mandates and go through all of this. Before we get started, my friends, head over to timcast.com, become a member to support our work, our journalism. I made a bunch of phone calls today, as much as the left tries to claim, or I shouldn't say the left, but as much as the, establishment authoritarian individuals try to claim I'm not doing journalism. I made the phone calls Because I do this, and people don't want to recognize that I'm doing it. Support that. And I'll show you. I'll tell you exactly what they told me when I called. I called 2 different human rights lawyers in New York City, and I called the city itself. I'm going to tell you what they said. Support us at timcast.com. You also get access to members-only content. We've got a few new shows being launched, and you will get an ad-free experience. Let's jump into this first story so I can tell you what's going on with the vaccine mandate, and then I want to tell you what I learned and what people in the city are doing. Gothamist reports. Mayor Bill DeBlasio signed an executive order on Monday that rubber-stamped New York City's COVID-19 vaccine requirement for a host of in-person activities. 2 weeks ago, when the city first announced the initiative known as Key to NYC, it only applied to dining indoors at restaurants, working out at the gym, and attending indoor entertainment venues. The mayor has now expanded the policy to nightclubs, pools, all city museums, and other cultural institutions. Quote, "We want people to enjoy the fullness of the city, but you got to be vaccinated to do it," Mayor Bill DeBlasio said at his Monday presser. "It's going to be a reason for people to get vaccinated, particularly younger people, and we know how important that is." That's the reason? I thought their health would be the reason. And I thought they going to their doctor to discuss their health would be their reason. As I always state, the city should not be telling you what to do. You should talk to your doctor and come to the decision that's best for you. That's not what New York wants. Businesses have until September 13th to come into compliance, at which point city agencies will start conducting inspections and issuing penalties for violations. Many restaurants have already begun checking customers' vaccination status at the door. Overall, some 56% of New York City residents are fully vaccinated, but there is still wide variation between demographic groups. The figure for those 18 to 24 hovers at 55, compared with 79% of those 65 to 74. But the rates drop again among older senior citizens to a low as 56% over 85. A group of elected officials representing Staten Island have said they plan to sue the city over the vaccine requirement, calling it a violation of people's rights. But the mayor and city health officials argue that the initiative will help people feel safer working at and patronizing restaurants and other businesses while allowing the city to fight the highly contagious Delta variant. My friends, this is a human rights violation that discriminates against people based on medical conditions they cannot control. That straight up should be a violation of the ADA, but I don't know if you're considered to have a disability based on your, some underlying condition. And that's why I wanted to call the city and ask them. They say, where will I need to show proof of vaccination? Let me jump over to Mayor Bill DeBlasio himself. Here's an image he posted. The key to NYC unlocks movie theaters, live music, concert venues, museum and galleries, aquariums and zoos, professional sports arenas, stadiums, convention centers, exhibition halls, performing arts theaters, bowling alleys, arcades, pool and billiard halls, recreational game centers, casinos, adult entertainment, restaurants, catering, event spaces, hotel banquet rooms, bars, cabarets, nightclubs, cafeterias, grocery stores with indoor dining, bakeries, coffee shops, fast food, quick service with indoor dining, gyms, fitness centers, fitness classes, pools, indoor studios, dance studios, and sports classes. Notice they said grocery stores with indoor dining. Pretty sure that means like Whole Foods in New York City, because you can go into these places and they have seating areas for you. Whole Foods has in New York in Washington Square has I think it's it's at Union. Yeah, Union. They've got a seating area upstairs for people to go and eat. That's indoor dining, isn't it? You can't go to Whole Foods now? This is disgusting. It is beyond disgusting, but my friends, it gets worse. They say a wide range of indoor entertainment back at the Gothamist. All of these rules apply to staff at these establishments, and unvaccinated people can still get a table at a bar or restaurant as long as it's outdoors. They say which venues are exempted. The list of exemptions include residential and office buildings, churches, community centers, and schools for pre-K through 12th grade. What forms of documentation will be accepted? They say in order to enter venues covered by the rule, you will have to show ID along with proof of vaccination. Accepted forms of proof include a CDC card or an official immunization record from outside the U.S. If you're worried about carrying these documents around, you can pull out a physical or digital photo. The NYC COVID Safe app is one option for storing a photo of your vaccination card. The policy does not mention private vaccine passports made by companies like Clear or Common Pass. They mention Excelsior, etc. And they go on to say, what if I just want to use the bathroom? Okay, now here's what gets weird. I want to pull up the actual law and show you the exemptions. They say that you can go to the bathroom, you can come in, whatever. They mention which vaccines are available. What if I use a fake record? Because U.S. vaccine cards carry the CDC seal, it's a federal crime to knowingly make, use, obtain, buy, or sell a fraudulent version. That's according to a public service announcement by the FBI in March. Under current state law, forgery of a written document constitutes either a Class A misdemeanor or a Class D felony, up to 7 years in prison. I think the craziest thing about all of this is that you're actually going to need identification. They say, do I have to show ID? In order to enter venues covered by the rule, you will have to show ID along with proof of vaccination. Accepted forms of proof include a CDC card or an official immunization record from outside the U.S. That's right, my friends. You will need to show your ID. I called NYC via 311, and I simply asked them. A woman answered, and I said, I'm curious about the vaccine mandate right now. If someone is unable to get the vaccine due to an underlying medical condition, is there an exemption? And the woman went, no. And I was just like, really? No. And I was like, oh, so they can't go to restaurants? They can't go? No. Are you sure about that? Just no, you can't. Sorry. And I was like, that sounds awfully definitive, you know? I didn't say that to her, but I was like, okay. I was like, well, that's kind of crazy. Like, my friend has MS. She can't get the vaccine. Does that mean that she's not welcome in the city? She can't. And the lady was like, I'm sorry. Yeah, there's no exceptions. The exemptions are, she's like, what is it? There's some exemptions, but that's not one of them. Can I put you on hold real quick? I'll pull them up. She comes back on. She then reads me the list of exemptions. I have that list. It's kind of ridiculous who is exempted from this. Musicians are exempted. Sports teams are exempted. But people with underlying condition, maybe you have cancer, maybe you have MS. Your doctor tells you can't get the vaccine. Maybe you had Guillain-Barré syndrome. Sorry, you're not welcome in New York City. Unless you use one of these loopholes, I guess. I'm a drummer and I'm here to eat some food and then drum or something. Because Pete Parada, formerly of The Offspring, that's who I'm referring to. I decided to call some human rights lawyers because this to me was shocking. The idea that they could tell someone with a medical condition you are not allowed in the building, to me, is insane. How did we come to this point? Rather fascistic, isn't it? The first firm I called, the guy said, look, we don't cover this stuff. I can't help you. I'm sorry. And I was like, okay. And they says, we are a discrimination, law firm. But look, man, we've been getting hundreds of calls on this issue, and I just tell people we can't help them with this. And I said, thank you for your time. Have a nice day. He said, have a good one, and hung up. Called another firm. Lawyer pops him on the phone, and I said, I just had a question about what was going on with the vaccine mandates and underlying medical conditions. I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. No, thank you. Have a nice day. Bye. Click. That was weird to me. It was weird. I called 2 firms. I'll call more, strapped for time. I don't have time to call every single law firm in the city. But the reaction I got from these 2 firms was almost just like fear or refusal. I wonder if some of these lawyers are just like vaccine zealots and they land in the tribe of everyone should be forced to get it. And so their attitude is like, screw you, I don't care, bye. And I asked them, I'm like, but I'm talking about medical conditions. They don't care. They don't care about you. They don't care about your loved ones. It's rather illiberal. You know, we used to be trying our best to, I guess, help people. You know, you build a building, you put a wheelchair ramp on it. I like that idea. I agree with that. Someone says, hey, we want to build a building. It's a store. Okay, well, all new buildings have to include a wheelchair ramp. It's fine by me. You haven't built the building yet. It's not that much to consider when you're putting the stairs up. You put a wheelchair ramp in. I think it helps a lot of people who are, unable to use stairs. In fact, wheelchair ramps aren't even about wheelchairs. Some people struggle to go up the stairs and would rather walk up the slow incline. Maybe they're older. I like the idea. It's like, okay, all new buildings, we'll do it that way. I also have no problem with the bathroom stuff they do in New York. That make single-use bathrooms. New buildings just have like 4 bathrooms and they're all single-use. I prefer that. I think it's fine. I think it's fine if you're like, just do it this way from now on. They're moving away from that. They're saying, no, we decided that people with disabilities and underlying medical conditions, screw you. You're not welcome in the city. Only young, able-bodied people who fall in line are allowed to go to our restaurants, gyms, movie theaters, clubs, etc. Here's the executive order from DeBlasio, and wait until you see the exemptions. Amazing. Requiring COVID vaccinations for indoor entertainment, recreation, and dining from August 16th. Whereas the pandemic has severely impacted New York, whereas, we get it. Now, therefore, pursuant to the powers vested in me by the laws of the state of New York and the city of New York, including but not limited to the New York Executive Law, the New York City Charter and the Administrative Code of the city of New York, and the common law authority to protect the public in the event of an emergency. Section 1, I hereby order that a covered entity shall not permit a patron, full or part-time employee, intern, volunteer, or contractor to enter a covered premises without displaying proof of vaccination and identification bearing the same identifying information as the proof of vaccination. I thought mandating ID was racist. I thought minorities struggle to get IDs. This is Bill DeBlasio. Is this going to impact voting now? 2, I hereby order that the following individuals are exempted from this order and therefore may enter a covered premises without displaying proof of vaccination, provided that such individuals wear a face mask at all times. At times they are unable to maintain 6 feet of distance from other individuals inside the premise. This is when I saw this, I said, okay. Certainly they're going to have the medical exemption, right? A, individuals entering for a quick and limited purpose, using a bathroom or picking up an order. Don't need a vaccine passport for that. A non-resident performing artist not regularly employed by the covered entity while they are in a covered premise for the purpose of performing. That means if you're a touring musician, you're allowed to be in the bar. What? How does that make sense? You're traveling out of state and you can come in the bar? A non-resident professional athlete or sports team who enters a covered premises as part of their regular employment for purposes of competing, and non-residential individual accompanying a performing artist or professional athlete team into a covered premise as part of their regular employment, so long as the performing artist or professional athlete are performing or competing in the covered premises. Isn't that amazing? So if you get a guitar and you call a bar and say, I'd like to play, a show, you can hang out at the bar, you can eat food, you can schmooze, you can cheers, you can bring your friends. That's right. They're allowed in too. From out of state, non-residents from out of the city. But if you're someone with MS or cancer and you wanted to go see a comedy show, maybe Ryan Long is performing, you love the comedian. Sorry, you're not welcome. Maybe you should, we'll bring them up on stage and pay them to perform for just a few minutes and then they're allowed to sit there, huh? I hereby direct each covered entity to develop and keep a written record describing the covered entity's protocol for implementing and enforcing the requirements of this order. Such written record shall be available for inspection upon request of a city official as followed by law. He says that I hereby direct each covered entity to post a sign in a conspicuous place that is viewable by prospective patrons prior to the entering of the establishment. The sign must alert patrons to the vaccination requirement in this order and inform them that employees and patrons are required to be vaccinated. The Department of Health and Mental Hygiene shall determine the text of such sign and provide a template on its website that a covered entity may use. A covered entity may use the sign available at NYC Goes, et cetera, et cetera. Now, there is one thing they do mention that he says this. I hereby direct the city's Commission on Human Rights to develop guidance to assist covered entities in complying with this order in an equitable manner consistent with applicable provisions of the New York City human rights law. The challenge there is that, this is why I was calling the lawyers, is it considered a disability if you have some underlying medical condition where your doctor says you can't get a vaccine? Not being able to get a vaccine isn't a disability. So that's why I called the lawyers who refused to answer the questions. I don't blame them. They're private practices. They don't have to answer any questions I have. And that's why I asked New York, the city itself. And I specifically chose to dial New York City's 311 number. This is their city services non-emergency line. I did that because this is the general inquiry line for vaccine mandate information. In fact, when you call them, the first thing they say is if you're looking for information about these things, press 1, or these things, press 2. And you press 2, you get an individual comes on and says, what do you want to know about this? And the reason I did that is because regular citizens of New York, that's the number they have to call. Businesses, that's the number they call. There is a special line for businesses. I was directed to ask the mayor himself because they said there is nothing we have saying you will be exempted for medical reasons. That's insane. I know I keep harping on the medical thing, but can I also point out that they're demanding IDs again? There's no exemption. And that means that if you're a business in New York and you call saying, hey, I got someone here who's in a wheelchair and sick, saying that they've got a negative test and they're ineligible, here's a letter from their doctor, they're going to say, no, you can't let them in. He says, Bill DeBlasio in his order, I hereby direct that any person or entity who is determined to have violated this order shall be subject to a fine, penalty, and forfeiture of not less than $1,000. If the person or entity is determined to have committed a subsequent violation of this order within 12 months of the initial violation, for which a penalty was assessed, such person or entity shall be subjected to a fine, penalty, and forfeiture of not less than $2,000. For every violation thereafter, such person or entity shall be subject to a fine, penalty, and forfeiture of not less than $5,000. If the person or entity committed the violation within 12 months of the violation for which the second penalty was assessed, the order may be enforced pursuant to sections 3.05, 3.07, and 3.11 of the Health Code and sections 558 and 562 of the Charter. I hereby suspend Appendix 7A of Chapter 7 of the Rules of the City of New York to the extent it would limit a violation of this order to be punished with a standard penalty of $1,000 or a default penalty of $2,000. Covered entities shall comply with further guidelines issued by DOHMH to further the intent of this order and increase the number of vaccinated individuals in the city. The emergency executive order shall take effect on August 17th, 2021, except for Section 9 of this order, which shall take effect on September 13th, 2021. So he is giving just a little bit of time, just shy of a month, to fall in line. Sickening and disgusting. There are some people who are refusing to back down. From the Daily Mail. He's segregating people. NYC diner owner says he won't demand proof of vaccination despite DeBlasio's new mandate that he says is no better than discriminating against black people, Muslims, or gays. In fact, that is true. The lowest vaccination rates are among the black community. Isn't it hilarious that they say voter ID is racist because minorities can't get IDs? Well, here we have actual evidence that there is a minority community being negatively impacted by this. And what do? They say, so what? Never accept the voter ID argument from these people ever again based on what they're doing in New York. I want to see every Democrat stand up and condemn the racism of New York. And you know what? I will say it outright. Yes, I believe what New York City is doing is systemically racist. I can complain about wokeness all day and night. The authoritarianism I can't stand. But I can tell you this, implementing policy that is a detriment to someone based on race, I believe is wrong. It's not so easy to go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. That's typically the issue. My complaint with affirmative action, because Asians are being barred based on their SAT scores because they're held to a higher standard just by virtue of looking a certain way. That is wrong. In New York City, we know for a fact that there are racial minority groups that are under-vaccinated, and barring them is wrong. Now, to be fair, New York City didn't say explicitly these racial groups aren't allowed, but perhaps we should consider the impact that our policies have on people in different communities. I've long felt that way. I just don't like the idea of how the woke are saying we should discriminate. That's wrong. You should not. Ibram Kendi's position is that there should be more discrimination. I don't think there should be. And to be fair, I suppose an argument to say the policy doesn't actually discriminate. You know, and what would they do, I suppose, if they were to implement a policy? Exempt certain races? You can't do that either. How about this? You just don't have the policy. You encourage people to get it. Private businesses, to a certain degree, can do what they want based on size, I think. And I think based on size, meaning small businesses. The challenge, I suppose, then, is New York City is all small businesses. So what do? I don't have all the answers. I try to be more liberty-minded. I don't necessarily want to say libertarian, but respecting the freedoms of individuals. There are certain limits. I don't think people should discriminate on the basis of race for their small business in a city. But I do think within reason, businesses have a right to decide. Ultimately, it comes down to, I guess, personal morality. It's not an easy situation. There are ethical conundrums everywhere. But I can tell you this. New York City right now has decided to segregate people. It's not just against people based on race. It's against people who by no fault of their own are unable to get that vaccine. And I have warned over and over again. And when I said this on Twitter and Cameron Kasky's like, oh, there's going to be medical exemptions. Yeah, well, not here. And y'all champion this stuff. Mary Josephine Generoso, manager of Pasticceria Rocco in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, told DailyMail.com the city is segregating people. She described the proof of vaccination requirement as a step two before civil rights, as a step two before civil rights movement. It would be like changing the words vaccinated and unvaccinated to black and white. DeBlasio pushed back on the backlash in a press conference Tuesday, saying this is not discrimination. It's about protecting people. Yeah, right, you scumbag. A New York City diner owner has blasted DeBlasio's new vaccine mandate. The manager of the pastry shop told Daily Mail that they're segregating people. To put up a sign saying only vaccinated people can enter is segregating people. DeBlasio is segregating people. It's the same as him saying you can't let a gay person into your business. The mayor fired back. Restaurants are required. Look at this. Here we go. Here's the image. So we do not discriminate against any customer based on sex, gender, race, creed, age, vaccinated or unvaccinated. All customers who wish to patronize are welcome into our establishment. Bravo to this restaurant. Pasticceria. It's Pasticceria Rocco in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. Brave and stunning. Standing up in the face of DeBlasio, threatening these fines. When people stand up and say no, it's when freedom wins. We cannot let these despots win. It's only going to get worse, my friends. I bring you now to the New York Times. You may have heard the news. The New York Times reports U.S. to advise boosters for most Americans 8 months after vaccination. Nursing home residents and healthcare workers will most likely be the first to get booster shots as soon as September, followed by other older people who were vaccinated last winter. Dave Rubin tweeted about this, remember? Twitter suspended him. He was right. He said booster shots are coming. He said that vaccines weren't working as promised. Well, I don't know who he was referring to when he says promised, but the point is, if you were under the assumption that you'd get the vaccine and it would be a surefire, preventative measure, that's not true. In fact, YouTube actually bars people from telling you that it is. All I can tell you right now is always go and talk to your doctor about what makes sense for you based on your health. And that's why I'm livid about what's happening in New York City. They defy that. That's why I can't stand the celebrities. They defy that. The celebrities come out and tell you to go do it. And I'm sick of hearing this because I know people who are affected by this. And it's sickening when I see these people on Twitter with their massive million followers are like, hey, everybody, go do it. And I'm like, no, go to your doctor. And they're like, you're scaring people. You just don't know anybody affected by it, so you don't care. I love it when the Democrats go online and say, Republicans only care about vaccines when it's their friends who get sick with COVID. Sure, fine, whatever. You only care about this because you don't know anybody who's barred from getting the vaccine. You go to the doctor, you talk to them. In some circumstances, the doctor says no. That's between you and your doctor. The celebrities go out here and just say, do it, do it, do it. No, don't take advice from stupid people on the internet. Take advice from your doctor. Then you get the New York Times coming out and just saying, okay, we're going to be doing booster shots. So what does that ultimately mean? They're going to mandate vaccines for all these businesses. And then every few months, they're going to say, did you get your update? And that's it. Now we're mandating people get these things. Listen. I don't know what else to say. The time is now. It's not going to happen later. It's not in some distant land. It's here. New York City is actively discriminating against people for medical reasons, and they don't care. It's disgusting. Not to mention, ultimately, I believe people have a choice about what makes the sense for them. So even if someone doesn't have cancer or something, maybe there's a woman who says, I am actively trying to get pregnant and I'm concerned about taking a treatment for this time. In fact, the CDC did come out and say it's fine for pregnant women to get it, but people will still weigh the risks on their own. And there are doctors who will say, for this reason, you are in a different category. They just don't care about individuals. They never did. They care about the authority. And there are people on Twitter who are going to champion this stuff like despotic psychopaths. We cannot allow the authoritarians to win. We can be responsible. We can defend our community. We can believe in doing right by public health, but not like this. DeBlasio didn't even give a legitimate mandate for people who are unable. He didn't even allow people to get negative tests. That's the other thing I called. I said, what if you just got a negative test? They said no. No. Not that the negative test, in my opinion, matters anyway. I give you a glimpse of where we're headed. In New Zealand, even CNN finds the story to be shocking. New Zealand announces it's locking down the entire country, ... over one COVID case. One. Insanity. We see this. Several hundred Defense Force troops and police will flood Sydney in an unprecedented show of force. You know this. I told you this. The soldiers have been deployed. We have this from The Guardian. Military medics should help run Sydney mass vaccination hubs, Albanese tells PM. ADF should be used to support health workers rather than police. Okay. Rather than police makes sense. Either way, though, they're talking about military takeover of the operation. They are talking about martial law. You want to know what they can do in Australia? Last year, state of emergency powers are in force across Australia to combat coronavirus. Here's how they are being used across the country. It's from about 1 year ago, but it's going viral now because the emergency powers extend into any emergency orders today. Here's what they say. South Australian authorities can use any force necessary. Any. They say authorized officers can break into any land, building, structure, or vehicle using whatever force necessary. Direct or prohibit the movement of people, animals, or vehicles. Put people in quarantine. Order people to undergo medical exams, tests, or treatment. Compel people to give information. What does this have to do with public health? Demanding information from people. Australia is in dire straits with this. And it can happen here. And it's starting. We're a couple months behind everyone else. That's the way it goes. We have a Bill of Rights. Perhaps it will protect us. But I bring you now to this story from Timcast.com. Wrongful termination suit filed against Houston Hospital over vaccination requirements. The judge said the public's interest in having a hospital capable of caring for patients during a pandemic far outweighs protecting the vaccination preference of 116 employees. The plaintiffs are not just jeopardizing their own health. They are jeopardizing the health of doctors, nurses, support staff, patients, and their families. So they lost. The hospital's being sued again. But it won't matter. Harmeet Dillon, famous lawyer, says, I've had to break the news to hundreds of people who call, email, given the federal and state employment agency and DOJ guidance on legality of employers mandating vaccines, which I disagree with and which is at odds with how they treat similar issues. Workers have few rights. Absent a bona fide medical or religious exemption, employers don't have to accommodate your preference. And even then, they have ways around a valid exemption and can also shame you with special tags and masks and such, encouraging coworkers to peck you to career death. Now, let me just pause for a minute and explain my position. I have said before that I'm in favor of businesses requiring vaccines for their employees. And some people challenge that, saying, how can you rectify that, reconcile that with being libertarian? No, hold on. It's not easy. It's not like we can just write down something and say it applies in all circumstances. There's nuance. What I mean to say is there's a guy, he hires 2 or 3 people. He's maybe 80 years old. And he's like, I don't want people coming in my house unless they're vaccinated because I'm old and at risk. I'm okay with that. There may be a small sandwich shop and they have 5 staff. And they say, I want everybody, to have a vaccine because I'm immunocompromised. I'm like, it should be a small business can say, here's who I choose to associate with. But it changes with scale. In this instance, this hospital has 24,947 employees. It's very, very different then. Because now you're talking about effectively a small village of people being denied work. That's where things change. And I will tell you this too. I don't have all the answers. I'm not the arbiter of truth and morality. I can't tell you what to decide and what you should support, and you are absolutely free to disagree with me and tell me why I'm wrong in the comments below. And as those of you who've watched my show in the past, absolutely my opinions change when presented with a good argument. I'm sure all of the libertarians loved it, and the anarchists, when Michael Malice came on and told me that the police are barring his right to keep and bear arms, so he wants to abolish them. And I was like, that's a good point. People have a right to keep and bear arms. Constitution is supposed to stop the government from obstructing, but the government does it anyway. From interfering, from infringing. So the point is, I don't have all the answers. I want to protect the individuals. It's tough. I think probably staunch libertarians would be okay with big businesses demanding whatever they want of their employees. But it affects society as a whole and creates this untenable situation, which is why I think businesses should not be allowed to discriminate on the basis of race or gender, etc., or on medical condition. But I can't pretend to know all of the hidden truths of the universe, and I can't pretend to know what will happen if we implement certain policies. I can only tell you that right now, I know people who are personally affected by the psychotic nature of what New York City is doing. And I can tell you this, that as it spreads, and it is, it will come to impact you and the people you love. And then what? I don't know. It's creepy. But I hope we don't go the route of Australia or New Zealand. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast, IRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.